He came back from the army and found his daughter living in the hen house. His reaction stopped the town. Michael Johnson never imagined that his homecoming after 3 years of military service would turn into the most painful experience of his life. What should have been a joyful reunion became the start of a battle that would mobilize the entire small town of Honey Creek in the countryside of North Carolina. It was when he walked through the family property's gate that Michael saw something that made his heart stop. His daughter Emily, whom he had left as a happy, well-cared-for 4-year-old, was now sleeping among the chickens in the old hen house at the back. The girl wore torn, dirty clothes, had straw stuck in her tangled hair, and clung to a speckled hen as if it were her only comfort in the world. Tears streamed down his sun-weathered face as Michael fell to his knees before the devastating scene. His hands shook so badly he could barely hold his military backpack. During 3 long years serving in peacekeeping missions, he had dreamed every day of the moment he would hold Emily again. Never could he have imagined finding her like this. Little Emily woke to the noise and for a few seconds just stared at the man in green uniform crying before her. Then, as if a distant memory surfaced, she whispered hoarsely, "Daddy, is it really you?" "My girl," was all Michael could say before the child ran into his arms. The embrace lasted several minutes, both crying too hard to speak. The hens clucked around them, as if sharing in the moment heavy with emotion and pain. Emily smelled of straw and dirt, and Michael felt his heart shatter as he realized how his little princess had been abandoned. "Where's Grandma Margaret?" Michael asked, still holding his daughter. Emily lowered her eyes and pointed to the house. "She's real sick, Daddy. Can't get out of bed no more. I take care of her, but she just sleeps." Michael carried Emily in his arms and walked toward the house he had left 3 years earlier. What he found inside was even more shocking. His mother, Mrs. Margaret, a woman who had always been strong and independent, lay in a dirty bed, clearly weakened and barely able to open her eyes. "Mom," Michael whispered, approaching the bed. Mrs. Margaret slowly opened her eyes, and a faint smile appeared when she recognized her son. "Michael, my boy, you're back." "What happened here, Mom? Where's Jessica?" The silence that followed was deafening. Emily nestled deeper into her father's arms, as if hiding from the reality about to be revealed. "Jessica, she left, son. 2 months after you went away. Said she wasn't going to wait around for you, that she wanted to live her own life." Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we're just starting out. Now, continuing. Mrs. Margaret's words echoed in Michael's mind like a painful refrain. Jessica, the woman he had married full of dreams and plans, had abandoned not just him but their own daughter. Emily, just 4 years old at the time, was left in the care of her grandmother, who was already struggling with health issues. "She took everything she could, Michael. Even the TV and the appliances. Said she had a right to it as your wife. I couldn't stop her. I was getting weak already." A mix of anger and sorrow tightened Michael's chest. For 3 years, he had sent money home faithfully, believing his family was well cared for. Never had he imagined Jessica would abandon Emily. "How did you survive all this time?" "Emily," Mrs. Margaret looked proudly at her granddaughter. "This little girl grew up too fast. She learned to take care of the chickens, sold the eggs to Mrs. Betty at the town's little market. With that money, she bought food and medicine for me." Michael looked at Emily, who was only 7 years old, and couldn't hold back his tears. How could such a small child have managed to support the household and care for a sick old woman? "Why didn't anyone tell me? Why didn't you write to me?" Jessica said she was going to tell you about the separation. "And then, I was ashamed, son. Ashamed to say your wife had abandoned your daughter. I thought you'd be devastated so far away, unable to do anything." Emily shifted in her father's lap and whispered, "I asked Grandma not to tell you, Daddy. I didn't want you to be sad so far away." The forced maturity of that 7-year-old child made Michael even more emotional. He kissed his daughter's forehead and promised, "I'll never leave you alone again, my princess. Never again." In the following days, Michael began to understand the depth of abandonment Emily had faced. The little girl had developed a strict routine. She woke before sunrise to feed the chickens, collected the eggs, made a simple porridge for her grandmother, and then walked 2 miles to town to sell the eggs at Mrs. Betty's little market. "She's a special child, Mr. Michael," Mrs. Betty remarked when he went to the market to see his daughter's routine. "Every day she came here, rain or shine, always polite, always worried if the money would be enough for Mrs. Margaret's medicine." "And school? Is she studying?" Mrs. Betty lowered her eyes, embarrassed. "She stopped going about 6 months ago. Said she couldn't leave Grandma alone. Teacher Catherine even came here a few times asking, but—" Michael felt his chest tighten again. Emily had lost not only her mother and her childhood, but was also missing her chance to study. The situation was far worse than he'd imagined. Back at the farm, Michael found Emily in the hen house, whispering to the chickens as if they were her close friends. She had given each one a name and seemed to know all their personalities. "This one's Speckles, Daddy. She was the first to lay eggs when Grandma got sick, and this little yellow one is Goldie. She always stays with me when I'm sad." "Why do you sleep here in the hen house, sweetheart?" Emily stayed silent for a few seconds, nervously fiddling with the straw. "In winter the bedroom gets too cold, but it's warm here because of the chickens. They keep me company when I'm scared." "Scared of what?" "Scared Grandma might stop breathing at night. Sometimes she gets so still and I worry." Michael had to sit down on the hen house floor to keep from falling. The weight that had been placed on this child's shoulders was immeasurable. Emily, just 7 years old, carried the burden of caring for a sick old woman and keeping the household running. That night, after managing to get Emily to sleep in her own bed for the first time in months, Michael went out to walk the property and think about how to fix this situation. That's when he heard voices coming from the road. 2 men were talking quietly, but he caught a few words: property, debt, and deadline. Curious, Michael moved closer silently and recognized one of the voices. It was William Thompson, the most influential merchant in town, known for lending money at high interest to small landowners. The other man he didn't know, but he had a big city accent. "The old woman won't last much longer," William said, "and with her son back, things could get complicated." "Are you sure the papers are in order?" the stranger asked. "Relax, lawyer, everything's taken care of." Mrs. Margaret signed everything when she was desperate to buy medicine. She had no choice. Michael felt a chill down his spine. What were these papers? What deal had his mother made with William? The next morning, as soon as Emily left to feed the chickens, Michael talked to Mrs. Margaret about what he had overheard the night before. "Mum, did you take out a loan with Mr. William?" Mrs. Margaret looked away, clearly embarrassed. "Michael, I needed to buy medicine. Emily was selling the eggs, but it wasn't enough. Mr. William offered to help." "What kind of help?" "He lent me $5,000, said it was to help a neighbor in need, but then the interest kept climbing. Now he says I owe $15,000. $15,000. Michael couldn't hide his shock. "Mom, did you sign any papers?" "I did, son. He said it was just a formality, but I didn't really understand what was written. My eyesight isn't good anymore." Michael asked to see the documents, and what he found was even worse than he had imagined. The papers contained abusive clauses that allowed William to take the property as payment for the debt, and the deadline had passed 2 months ago. "Mom, why didn't you tell me about this in your letters?" "I tried to handle it myself, son. I didn't want to worry you. And then, when Mrs. Margaret had the stroke, I couldn't write properly anymore." That's when Michael understood why William had been so confident in their conversation the night before. He had taken advantage of a sick, elderly woman's desperation to pull off a scam that, legally, seemed airtight. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, don't forget to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we're just starting out. Now, continuing. Michael spent the next few days trying to better understand his family's financial situation and what he could do to turn things around. Emily kept up her routine of tending to the chickens and her grandmother, but now, with her father's help, he had decided not to return to the army. "Daddy, are you going to stay with me now?" Emily asked as they collected eggs together. "Yes, my princess, forever." The smile that lit up the little girl's face was the first genuinely happy one Michael had seen since coming home, but he knew they still had a long battle ahead. It was on a Thursday afternoon that William Thompson showed up at the property, accompanied by the man Michael had seen on the road. They arrived in a black imported car that stood out starkly against the rural simplicity of the area. "Mr. Michael," William waved with false friendliness. "Heard you were back from the peacekeeping. Welcome home, Mr. William," Michael replied coldly, stepping between the visitors and the house where Emily was playing. "This is Lawyer Robert, my attorney. We came to discuss the situation with the property." The lawyer, a well-dressed man in a light suit, opened a briefcase and pulled out several papers. "Mr. Michael, I regret to inform you that your mother has an overdue debt with us in the amount of $15,000. Since the property was put up as collateral—" "I've seen the papers," Michael interrupted, "and I have some questions about these clauses." The lawyer and William exchanged quick glances, clearly not expecting Michael to be familiar with the documents. "Look, Michael," William said, trying to keep his tone friendly. "I don't want to take your property. I'm a Christian, a family man. But business is business. Your mother signed, the interest is accruing." "Interest of how much?" 10% a month, as stated in the contract." 10% a month is illegal, Mr. William. The legal maximum is 2%. The silence that followed was tense. Emily, who had been playing near the chickens, sensed the shift in the air and moved closer to her father, hugging his leg. "Daddy, who are these men?" "They're just people who came to talk, sweetheart. Go back to playing with the chickens." The lawyer cleared his throat and tried to regain control of the situation. "Mr. Johnson, regardless of your interpretation of the interest rates, the fact is your mother signed a valid contract. If full payment isn't made by Friday, we'll be forced to take appropriate legal action." "Friday? That's just a day from now." "Exactly," William smiled, flashing his gold teeth. "Like I said, I don't want to harm anyone. If you can come up with $15,000 by tomorrow, the problem is solved." Michael knew they had calculated everything. A former soldier, just back from military service, wouldn't have $15,000 lying around. It was a perfect scheme, designed to take the Johnson family's property. After the two men left, Michael spent the night wide awake, thinking of alternatives. He had some savings from his military service, but it wasn't even close to the $15,000 demanded. Besides, even if he got the money, it wouldn't solve the real problem. William would still be a threat. By Friday morning, Michael had made a decision that would change not just his life, but the entire community of Honey Creek. He put on his full military uniform, placed Emily in a neighbor's borrowed car, and drove to the town square. It was market day, and the square was packed with vendors, buyers, and onlookers. Michael parked right in the center, lifted Emily into his arms, and climbed onto the fountain in the middle of the square. "Everyone!" Michael shouted, his military voice echoing across the square. "I need your attention." People began to gather, curious about the soldier yelling in the middle of the square while holding a small child. "My name is Michael Johnson. I served in the U.S. Army for 3 years. I came home this week and found my 7-year-old daughter living in a hen house because my mother is sick and my ex-wife abandoned the family." A murmur of shock rippled through the crowd. Some recognized Emily, the little girl who sold eggs at the market. "For 3 years, I sent money home faithfully. For 3 years, I believed my family was being taken care of. But what I found was a child taking on adult responsibilities, caring for a sick elderly woman sleeping among chickens because the house was too cold." The women in the crowd began to cry at his words. Emily buried her face in her father's neck, overwhelmed by all the attention. "But that's not all I want to tell you. I want to tell you about Mr. William Thompson, who took advantage of my sick mother's desperation to pull a scam that would leave my daughter homeless." William, who had been selling tools on the other side of the square, started pushing through the crowd, his face red with anger. "He loaned my mother $5,000 for medicine, but he charged 10% interest a month. Now he wants $15,000 or he'll take our property." "That's a lie," William shouted, moving closer to the fountain. "He's slandering my name." "A lie?" Michael pulled papers from his pocket and held them up for everyone to see. "Here are the contracts, 10% interest a month. Can someone from the community read this and confirm?" Mrs. Catherine, the retired teacher who was well respected in town, stepped forward and took the papers. She read them aloud, and with every abusive clause she mentioned, the crowd's outrage grew. 10% monthly interest, penalty clauses for late payment, automatic transfer of property in case of default. Mrs. Catherine shook her head in disgust. "This is outrageous. It's illegal." "See that, William?" someone from the crowd yelled. "How many other families have you tricked like this?" William tried to defend himself, but his voice was drowned out by the angry shouts of the community. That's when Mrs. Martha, a white-haired lady who had lived in town for over 70 years, approached the fountain. "Michael, my son, you can come down from there. The community will help you." "Mrs. Martha, this girl," she pointed to Emily, "we all know her. We've all seen her passing by here every day, selling eggs to buy medicine for her grandmother, and none of us did anything to help." The silence that followed was awkward. Mrs. Martha was right. The community had failed Emily and Mrs. Margaret. "How many of you have been tricked by William?" Mrs. Martha asked loudly. Slowly, several hands rose in the crowd. First 2, then 5, then over 10 people raised their hands. "I lost my motorcycle because of him," shouted a young man. "He took my husband's cattle," said a woman. "My daughter lost her store because of his interest rates," added another. Michael climbed down from the fountain, carrying Emily, moved by the community's response. But what happened next truly changed everything. Mrs. Martha pulled an old wallet from her purse and began counting money. "I have $1,000 here. It's to help this family." "I have 500, said the pharmacy owner. "I can give 300, offered the mechanic. Within minutes, over 20 people were offering money to help the Johnson family. Michael was so emotional he could barely speak. "Everyone, I can't accept this. You barely know me." "We know this girl," said Mrs. Catherine, pointing to Emily, "and we know her character. Any child who does what she did deserves our help." William, seeing the situation had spiraled out of control, tried to slip away discreetly, but the crowd wouldn't let him. "Where are you going, William?" someone shouted. "We're settling this now." "I want my money back," demanded the young man who had lost his motorcycle. "And my husband's cattle. How will you return it?" The public pressure on William was so intense that he finally agreed to sit at a table right there in the square to renegotiate all the abusive debts. His lawyer, seeing how things were going, simply disappeared. Mrs. Catherine, with her experience as a teacher, took on the role of mediator. She gathered all of William's contracts with the community families and began recalculating the amounts based on legal interest rates. "According to my calculations," she announced after 2 hours of work, "considering only the interest allowed by law, William is the one who owes money to most of these families." The merchant was visibly nervous, sweating despite the cool evening breeze. He tried to argue, but the community's pressure was too strong. All right, he finally said. "Let's forget all the debts. Everyone's even with me." "Not quite," interjected Mrs. Martha. "You have to return what you took from these families illegally. And you have to apologize to this girl," someone in the crowd added, pointing to Emily. William looked at Emily, who was in her father's arms, watching everything with wide eyes. For the first time in many years, the merchant seemed genuinely ashamed. "I'm sorry, little one. Your grandfather lent me money once when I was starting out in business. I shouldn't have done this to your family." Emily looked at her father, as if asking for permission to speak. Michael nodded. "It's okay, Mr. William, but will you stop doing this to other people now?" The innocent question from the 7-year-old had a far greater impact than any speech from the adults. William bowed his head and promised to change his business practices. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we're just starting out. Now, continuing. What happened in Honey Creek's town square that Friday spread quickly throughout the region. The story of the soldier who publicly defended his daughter and exposed the abusive practices of a local merchant reached the newspapers in larger cities. In the following days, Michael received visits from journalists, human rights organization representatives, and even politicians who wanted to associate themselves with the story. But what impressed him most was the spontaneous mobilization of the community itself. On the Monday after the town square incident, Michael woke up to the sound of voices and machinery coming from outside the house. When he went out to see what was happening, he found more than 30 people working on his property. "What's going on here?" he asked Mrs. Martha, who was coordinating the efforts. "The community decided to come together to renovate the house and the hen house. No one in this family will sleep among chickens anymore." Michael watched the commotion with tears in his eyes. Masons, electricians, painters all worked voluntarily to improve his family's living conditions. Emily ran between the workers, fascinated by all the activity. "Daddy, are they going to make a new hen house for my friends?" she asked, referring to the chickens. "Yes, sweetheart, and you'll have a pretty room all to yourself." For an entire week, the Johnson family's property became a community construction site. The house was completely renovated, with new electrical wiring, plumbing, paint, and even furniture donated by neighbors. The hen house was rebuilt with modern materials, but kept a cozy design so Emily could continue caring for her beloved chickens. But the biggest surprise came on Thursday of that week. A white van stopped in front of the property, and out stepped an elegant middle-aged woman. Michael recognized her immediately. It was Jessica, his ex-wife. Emily was in the new hen house when she saw her mother approaching. The girl's reaction was immediate. She hid behind one of the larger chickens, visibly trembling. "Emily," Jessica called uncertainly. "Sweetheart, it's Mommy." "I don't want to talk to you," Emily replied, without moving from behind the chicken. Michael stepped forward, trying to control the anger he felt seeing Jessica there. "What do you want?" "I came to get my daughter, Michael. I heard what happened and—" "Get your daughter?" Michael couldn't hide his outrage. "You abandoned her 3 years ago. Where were you when she slept in the hen house? Where were you when she sold eggs to buy medicine for my mother? I was trying to find myself. I needed to live my life. And now? Why come back now?" Jessica hesitated before answering. "I saw the news report about you in the paper, and I met a very good man. He wants to start a family, and Emily is part of my life." Michael felt his blood boil. Jessica had abandoned Emily when times were tough, and now she wanted to take her away just as things were getting better. "Emily isn't going anywhere. She stays here with me." "Michael, I have rights. I'm her mother." "What kind of mother abandons a 4-year-old child?" The argument was heating up when Emily stepped out from behind the chicken and approached her parents. Her next words silenced both Michael and Jessica. "I remember you, Mommy. I remember when you yelled at Grandma and said you wouldn't stay to take care of a sick old woman and a whiny kid. I remember when you took away my favorite doll and said I didn't deserve nice things." Jessica paled at her daughter's detailed memories. "Emily, sweetheart, I was stressed back then, and I remember when you said I was a burden in your life and that things would be better when I wasn't in the way of your plans anymore." The silence that followed was devastating. Michael had never imagined that Jessica could have said such cruel things to Emily. Now he understood better the trauma the girl carried. "Emily." Jessica tried to approach, but the girl stepped back. "I don't want to go with you. I want to stay with my dad and my chickens. They never abandoned me." The simplicity and pain of that statement deeply moved Michael. Emily had found in the chickens the constancy and affection her own mother failed to provide. Jessica tried to argue about maternal rights and legal custody, but her presence had drawn the attention of neighbors working on the renovation. Soon a small crowd gathered, watching the argument. That's when Mrs. Martha stepped forward and said something that changed the course of the conversation. "Young lady, you have the nerve to show up here after 3 years, after this child nearly went without because of you?" "You don't know my story," Jessica replied defensively. "Oh, I do. Everyone here does. You ran off with another man and left your daughter in the care of a sick old woman. This little girl had to grow up too fast because of you." Other women from the community joined Mrs. Martha, all outraged by Jessica's presence. The social pressure on her was immense. "Besides," Mrs. Martha continued, "any court will want to know where you've been for 3 years, and they'll want to know how a 7-year-old has more responsibility than her own mother." Jessica realized she had no support from the community. She tried one last time to convince Emily. "Sweetheart, come with Mommy. You'll have a better life, nice clothes, a private school." "I already have a good life," Emily replied with surprising confidence. "I have my dad, my grandma, my chickens, and all these people who help me. I don't need you." The clear rejection from her daughter was the final blow for Jessica. She realized she had lost Emily for good, not to Michael, but to the consequences of her own choices. "Fine," she said finally, tears in her eyes. "But I want to be able to visit her sometimes." "If Emily wants to see you," Michael replied, "you'll be welcome, but the decision will always be hers." Jessica said goodbye to Emily, who accepted a quick hug but showed no emotion. After she left, Emily returned to the new hen house and said to her father, "Daddy, do you think I'll ever be able to forgive her?" "Forgiveness comes with time, sweetheart. When you're older, maybe you'll understand why people make the choices they do. But I won't forget that when I needed her, it was the chickens who stayed with me." Michael hugged Emily, once again struck by his daughter's wisdom beyond her years. She was right. The chickens had been more constant in her life than her own mother. The property renovations were completed the following week, and the transformation was remarkable. The house looked beautiful, with bright colors and new furniture. The hen house had become a true palace for the birds, with spacious areas, cozy nests, and even a covered space for rainy days. But the biggest change wasn't in the physical structures. It was in the Johnson family's life. Mrs. Margaret, now receiving proper medical care arranged by the community, began showing signs of improvement. Emily returned to school and made new friends, and Michael found work as a fitness instructor at the town's gym. It was during one of these gym classes that Michael met Sarah, a veterinarian who had recently moved to Honey Creek. She had heard about the Johnson family's story through town gossip and offered to care for Emily's chickens free of charge. "You don't have to," Michael said when Sarah showed up at the property with her veterinary bag. "I know I don't have to, but I want to. That girl deserves to have her friends well taken care of." Emily was fascinated by Sarah from their very first meeting. The veterinarian explained to her how to better care for the chickens, taught her about proper feeding, and even gave scientific names to the bird breeds. "Your Speckles is a Rhode Island Red mixed with a local breed," Sarah explained, as she examined Emily's favorite hen. "She's very smart and affectionate." "How do you know she's affectionate?" "By the way she stays close to you. Chickens choose their favorite people, you know." Emily smiled, proud to be Speckles' favorite person. Little by little, Sarah became a constant presence on the property, always with some professional excuse to stop by, but clearly interested in getting to know Michael better. It was Emily who first noticed the mutual interest between her father and Sarah. "Daddy, Aunt Sarah likes you," she said one afternoon as they played in the hen house. "Why do you think that?" "Because she blushes when you smile, and because she always asks if you're okay when she comes to take care of the chickens." Michael laughed at his daughter's perceptiveness. "And would you like it if Aunt Sarah spent more time here?" "Yes, I would. She's nice and makes the chickens happy. And you're happy when she's here too." The simplicity of Emily's answer moved Michael. After everything they'd been through, his daughter could still find joy in small happinesses and wish for his happiness too. The relationship between Michael and Sarah developed slowly, always with respect for Emily's feelings and the family's needs. Sarah showed endless patience with Mrs. Margaret, helping with medical care and bringing medicine when needed. 3 months after the incident in the square, life in Honey Creek had changed significantly. William Thompson, pressured by the community, completely changed his business practices and began offering loans with fair interest rates. Some families who had lost property because of him managed to recover part of what they'd lost. The Johnson family's story also inspired changes in town. A community fund was created to help struggling families, coordinated by Mrs. Martha and Mrs. Catherine. The health clinic gained a new doctor, funded by donations from people who had learned about the story through the media. But the most significant change happened in Emily's own heart. The girl who had been forced to grow up too soon began reclaiming aspects of the childhood she'd lost. She started playing again, laughing without worry, and dreaming about the future. "Daddy, when I grow up, I want to be a veterinarian like Aunt Sarah," she said one night as Michael tucked her into her new bed. "Why?" "To take care of animals who are alone, just like the chickens took care of me." Michael kissed his daughter's forehead. moved by the generosity of this child who had suffered so much, yet still wanted to dedicate her life to caring for others. The hen house, which had once been a symbol of abandonment and need, became a symbol of resilience and love. Emily continued caring for the chickens with affection, but now she slept in her own bed, in her own room, surrounded by the love of a rebuilt family and a community that had learned the true meaning of solidarity. The story spread beyond the borders of Honey Creek, inspiring other communities to mobilize for their vulnerable children. Michael received invitations to share his experience in other towns, but he preferred to stay home, working at the gym, caring for his mother, and building a new life with Sarah and Emily. The biggest challenge, however, was yet to come. 6 months after the incident in the square, Jessica returned to Honey Creek accompanied by a family law attorney. She had married a businessman from Atlanta and wanted to formalize shared custody of Emily. "I won't accept this," said Michael when he received the court notification. "She abandoned Emily when she needed her the most." "Michael, legally she has rights," explained the lawyer the community had hired to defend him. "We need to prove Emily is better off here." "How do you prove something so obvious?" "By showing her routine, the community's support, her school progress, the emotional bond with you and this place." The legal process lasted 3 months and divided the community between outrage and apprehension. Everyone feared Emily would be forced to spend time with Jessica in Atlanta, far from everything and everyone she had learned to love. The decisive moment came when the judge handling the case decided to speak with Emily privately, as is customary in cases involving minors. The girl, then 8 years old, was taken to a private room in the Winston-Salem courthouse, accompanied only by the judge and a psychologist. Michael waited outside that room for 2 hours that felt like an eternity. When Emily came out, she ran into his arms without saying a word about what she had discussed with the judge. The court's decision was announced a week later, in a session that packed the small county courthouse. The judge, an experienced man with graying hair, began his remarks by explaining the complexity of the case. "This is one of the most touching cases I've reviewed in 20 years on the bench. We have a mother who claimed rights over a daughter she abandoned, and a father who dedicated his life to repairing the damage caused by that abandonment." The room was utterly silent. Emily sat between Michael and Aunt Sarah, swinging her legs nervously. During my conversation with the child, I asked where she felt happiest. Her answer was simple: "In the hen house, with my dad and my chickens." I asked if she'd like to visit the big city where her mother lives. She replied, "Big cities don't have hen houses." A faint smile appeared on the judge's face. I also asked what she thought was most important in life. Her answer: "People who stay when you need them." Jessica lowered her head, clearly moved by her daughter's words. "For all these reasons," the judge continued, "and considering the child's best interests, I rule that full custody shall remain with the father, Michael Johnson. The mother is granted the right to monthly supervised visits, always held in the town of Honey Creek." The decision was met with quiet applause in the room. Michael hugged Emily, who whispered in his ear, "Now can I stay with my chickens forever?" "Forever, my princess." Jessica approached after the hearing and, for the first time since her return, showed genuine remorse. "Emily, I know I did wrong. I hope one day you can give me a second chance." "It's okay, Mom, but I'm staying with Dad." "I know, sweetheart, and I think that's for the best." Their hug was brief but meaningful. Emily had managed to partially forgive her mother without giving up the life she had built with her father. The Johnson family's story became legendary in Honey Creek and the surrounding area. The hen house where Emily had found refuge became a symbol of resilience and overcoming adversity. Many people visited the property to meet the girl and her famous chickens in person. Aunt Sarah and Michael married 2 years later in a simple ceremony on the property, with Emily as the maid of honor and the chickens as special guests. Mrs. Margaret, now recovered and walking with a cane, gave the couple her blessing. "Michael was always a good boy," she said during the wedding speech. "Aunt Sarah, you brought joy to our home when we needed it most." Emily gained 2 siblings in the following years. First a boy she insisted on naming Rooster, and then a girl who was called Straw, because she was born with hair the color of the straw from the hen house where I used to sleep, Emily explained to anyone who would listen. The Johnson family's property became a model of rural sustainability. With Sarah's help, They developed chicken-raising techniques that turned Emily's hobby into a small family business. The eggs from Emily's farm, as it came to be known, were sought after throughout the region for their quality and the story behind them. Michael never returned to the army, choosing instead to dedicate his life to his family and the community that had welcomed him during his hardest times. He became a physical education instructor at several local schools and coordinator of the community program supporting vulnerable families. Emily grew into a determined and generous young woman, always concerned with the well-being of animals and the people around her. By 15, she already knew she wanted to be a veterinarian and dedicate her life to caring for abandoned animals. "Dad, remember when you found me sleeping in the henhouse?" she asked one afternoon, 10 years after that life-changing moment. "How could I forget? Sometimes I think, if that hadn't happened, I might never have discovered the strength I have inside me." Michael looked at his daughter, now a confident, mature teenager, and was moved by the wisdom in her words. Emily was right. Adversity had revealed an inner strength that might never have been discovered otherwise. The original henhouse was preserved as a kind of memorial. Emily made sure to show visitors the place where she had slept for months, explaining how that experience had shaped her personality and values. "The chickens taught me that family isn't just about blood," she often said. "Family is who stands by you when you need them most." The community of Honey Creek never forgot the lesson learned that day in the square when a soldier publicly exposed his neglect of his daughter. The town established a permanent child protection program coordinated by Mrs. Martha and funded by voluntary community contributions. William Thompson, the former loan shark, became one of the program's biggest supporters. He had completely turned his life around after the incident in the square, transforming his business into a microcredit company with fair interest rates and reasonable terms for small, rural entrepreneurs. "That little girl taught me money means nothing if you lose your dignity to get it," he often told anyone who would listen. The story spread far beyond Honey Creek, shared in schools, churches, and television programs as an example of resilience and community unity. Emily, always shy about media attention, preferred they talk about the chickens rather than her. "They're the real heroes," she always insisted. "I just did what any child would do. I looked for love where I found it." Jessica continued visiting Emily monthly and over time built a respectful relationship with her daughter. She never again contested custody, recognizing that Emily had found her true family in Honey Creek. "My daughter is much happier here than she ever would have been with me," she said during one of her last visits. "I've learned that sometimes loving means letting go." Their relationship improved significantly when Emily turned 18 and could freely choose when and how to spend time with her mother. Maturity helped her better understand the circumstances that led Jessica to abandon the family, though she never forgot or minimized the pain it had caused. Sarah became officially the mother Emily had never had, taking on this role with natural ease and affection. She taught Emily about science, animals, plants, and most importantly, how to heal emotional wounds with patience and love. "Aunt Sarah taught me that caring for someone isn't just about giving food and shelter," Emily would explain to people. "It's about giving attention, affection, and showing that person they matter." The farm grew over the years, but Emily always made sure to keep the original hen house exactly as it was on the day her father found her there. The hens Speckles and Goldie, now old by their species standards, continued receiving special care until the end of their lives. "They saved me when I needed it most," Emily would say. "Now it's my turn to care for them." When Speckles, Emily's favorite hen, reached the natural end of her life at 12 years old, the entire community came together for the funeral of the bird who had been the girl's companion in her hardest moments. The event might seem excessive to some, but for Emily and the community of Honey Creek, it made perfect sense to honor the memory of someone who had offered comfort to an abandoned child. "She was my first true friend," Emily said during the short speech she gave in the backyard of the property. "She taught me that love has no species, only heart." Mrs. Margaret, now in her 80s but still sharp, watched with emotion as her granddaughter showed such tenderness toward the animals. "That girl has a heart as big as the world," she remarked to Sarah. The Johnson family story became part of the local school curriculum, used to teach values like solidarity, perseverance, and social responsibility. The children in the area themselves began taking better care of their pets after hearing Emily's story and her chickens. Michael, at 45, had found the peace he'd been searching for after so many years of military service and family struggles. He often said the day he found Emily in the henhouse was both the worst and the best of his life. Worst because it revealed his daughter's suffering. Best because it allowed him to do something about it. Sometimes you have to hit rock bottom to discover what you're capable of, he reflected. Emily taught me that no matter how hard things get, there's always a way to start over. The Johnson family property became a must-visit spot for tourists passing through the region. Emily's henhouse, as it came to be known, welcomed hundreds of visitors each year, all curious to see the place where a girl had found the strength to overcome abandonment. Emily, ever generous, personally greeted many of these visitors, sharing her story and showing how she'd turned trauma into motivation to care for other vulnerable beings. She started a small educational program on the farm, teaching children about animal care and social responsibility. Every chicken here has a name and a personality, she explained to visiting groups. Just like people, only they don't judge, abandon, or lie. That's why they're better than a lot of folks. The simplicity and depth of such observations left adults impressed. Many came expecting just a local curiosity, but left with deep reflections on human relationships and life values. William Thompson's microcredit program, inspired by the personal change he experienced after the incident in the square, expanded to other towns in the region. He always made sure to share his own story of transformation, explaining how a 7-year-old girl had changed his perspective on money and human connections. "I used to be a man who only thought about profit," he said in his talks on ethical entrepreneurship. "A girl who slept among chickens taught me that there are things more important than money." The community of Honey Creek took pride in having created a story that inspired people across the country. The town, once known only for its honey production and small-scale farming, became associated with values like solidarity and perseverance. End of story. Now tell us, what did you think of Emily's transformation? Where have you been following us from? If this story touched your heart, leave a comment sharing your thoughts. Do you believe the community made the right decision in supporting the Johnson family? We'd love to hear your perspective. Thank you so much for joining us. Don't forget to leave a like and, most importantly, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss other heartwarming stories like this one.